You're entering Corsi Nation.
This is Jerome Corsi. We got a special guest with us today, Tony Shaffer. Tony, welcome back.
Hey, good to see you.
It's really great to have you back. Tony, of course, I consider my go-to national security expert. I mean, Tony, you have your own show, Tony. Why don't we plug your own show for a minute?
Well, I'm still guest hosting, I guess, a semi-permanent guest host of Ed Henry's Wake Up Patriots. We're on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays with Chris Cordani and I. It's a lot of fun. We inform, educate, and entertain. It's a lot, So you've been on it.
Oh, I've been on it. I love being on it. It's
people
always
love
fun.
you. People love you. Yeah.
Well, it's always a great show to be on. And Tony, just give some of your credentials in terms of your work. I know with the White House, you're working at national security, which is extensive.
So I'm a retired military case officer, which is official parlance for spy. I served 30 and a half years, retired as lieutenant colonel and a GS-14 because I was in a special program, just saying. Since before I retired, I was a whistleblower on something called Able Danger. Our friend Kurt Weldon had us all come out and disclose some of the activities that related to the fact we knew about the 9/11 hijackers in this special program before 9/11, and we were stopped from stopping them. That more to come on that soon. Tucker Carlson and Kurt just had a interview, so there's more coming on that. And then after I after I retired, I worked a couple different think tanks, ran the London Center for Policy Research after my friend and mentor, Dr. Herb London, passed. I see what, I did. I'm an actor and producer. I produced a series called Chain of Command for Nat Geo right there over my shoulder. Acted in something called Spy's Eye. I also was the national security advisor to the Trump 2020 campaign. Little hint, they didn't take my advice. They lost. Just saying. So we could tell stories there, couldn't we, Jerry? So anyway,
we can tell lots of stories there. That's for sure.
And then most recently, I'm an elected official here in Chowan County. I'm a county commissioner, and I continue to do media and work for Newsmax as a contributor. So there you go.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Appreciate that. I want to talk today. I've been writing a lot about and doing podcasts on this port in Chile, this deep water port that it is being. China now has a memorandum of understanding to buy the rights to develop it. My friend and co-author Todd Callender has the rights to the port. That's through his investment group in Barbados, which is the Cotwell Group. It's an insurance investment group, and this is a key strategic, I think, challenge for the Trump administration because China wants this port on the Pacific to be part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, their landing spot in South America. And Trump's going to have to act fast to get Rubio in gear, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, in order to enter into the negotiations because it's possible to grab this port from China, provided the United States makes an offer on it. And so, Tony, why don't we just begin there? Because I think, the key, awareness in terms of national security issues, and Chris Cordani is showing here where the port is located. It's strategically accessible to Argentina. Got two low gradient passes where the trucks can bring the produce from Argentina to these ports. And these ports, the Copia E port goes directly on the Pacific to China, so it bypasses having to ship out of a port in the Atlantic side of South America to in Argentina, go through the Panama Canal. This port will cut 15 days from the trip to China and have major deep water access to all of South America. So again, I think the issue here is the strategic control of a resource that's important to our hemisphere and the national security implications if China gets this port. And what are your initial thoughts here, Tony?
So, there's three things going on that I think the Trump administration has to pay attention to. First is the fact that the Chinese essentially declared war on us. And for purposes of our conversation, that war includes economic and production of resources husbanding of resources, controlling those resources. So this right here is a key issue relating to not only trade and not what the Chinese may need, is the fact that the Latin America, South America in particular, is one of our most reliable trading partners, and we need a lot of what they produce. So do the Chinese, by the way. So anything we can do to slow or degrade the Chinese ability to absorb resources, especially those that we want, is a good thing. And we are in a competition. It's a competition of civilizations, if you will. The Chinese have said that they want to eventually dominate the Pacific Rim. This is part of the Pacific Rim. They've already said in their own doctrine that that is a national objective, and they will accomplish that objective through a series of business deals, commercial buyouts, and influence. They're first wanting to use soft power, buying people out, trying to obtain access to ports and resources for their own purposes, and then trying to push us out of the market. And as you said, the Belt and Road thing is very important. That is the competition to the G7, G20, whatever G you want to bring up. That's the alternative to it. And much of what we're trying to do right now, Jerry, is to deter people from joining that. As a matter of fact, I think India is one of the latest nations we've convinced to rethink their membership in that for a number of reasons, which we don't. That's probably a conversation for a different day. So, but to your point, this is an important physical location that the Chinese covet and would be able to take advantage of as part of their larger grand strategy. So that is one factor. Secondly, regarding just the Trump doctrine, President Trump is now establishing a doctrine which is going to look a lot like the Monroe Doctrine. And I would like to believe, Jerry, as we develop a strategy, as Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio look at this, and keep in mind, they've only been in office 3 months, so it's going to take some time. But part of what they have to do is take a step back, look at the big picture, and recognize that they need to take elements of the Cold War regarding how Reagan approached the Cold War, regarding looking at the Soviet Union as an evil empire. China is now that evil empire. So you got to look at it kind of for that perspective. But more importantly, you got to modernize the approach to look at how we can counter a near peer who has essentially said, we're going to take you on playing your own game, economic destruction. Remember, Jerry, you know this. We were able to essentially convince the Russians that the Strategic Defense Initiative was real. And we helped bankrupt them through a number of things that had them overspend, get over their skis. And then we helped also make them really troubled by Afghanistan, by the war in Afghanistan. These things really had a big impact. And then plus, we went about using Dallas, the TV show Dallas, and other media to undermine the Soviet people's resolve regarding thinking that we were evil. And, you know, this is something that I think is really not appreciated. The Russians wanted to, we want to import and show Dallas to show people how corrupt the Americans are. It's like, no, all the Russians wanted to become Americans.
Right. They all wanted to be Dallas. That's
right. So in this case, the Chinese are using similar items against us, but they're using destructive methods to do it against us. So they're trying to buy Hollywood. One of the biggest things they bought and control is Hollywood. Their propaganda is now injected directly into the American mainstream via Hollywood. So we got to put a stop to this. So what I'm saying is we need to learn the lessons of how we won in the past and how some of those lessons, some of those techniques are now being focused back on us by the Chinese. So that's part two. This port, the strategy that includes this port has to be included in this modified Monroe Doctrine that becomes the Trump Doctrine. So those two things are related. Third, and I think probably simply put, is having the political will and foresight to take action ahead of time. This, Jerry, is a point of engagement that has to be recognized sooner than later. So this is where I hope this is something that gets to the higher priority list of what they're doing right now. And that way they can recognize that through this one example, they need to start looking at the other two things that I just outlined. So,
well, if you take a look at the Monroe Doctrine, which of course was President Monroe, who early on said that, the Western Hemisphere was our sphere of influence,
Right.
and that foreign nations were not going to be welcome to take positions in our hemisphere. And now Donald Trump, Trump Doctrine, which I think is a good way to recharacterize the 21st century Monroe Doctrine. President Trump is saying, well, we really ought to be involved with Greenland. It could become a protectorate or some.
Yep.
And by the way, Canada should be the 51st state. So there we are, reaching all the way to the Arctic. And then his visions extending down south. We just recently have Argentina agreeing to take a naval port down at the tip of Argentina that China wanted. And Milei has said, no, the United States will have that port. Now, Chile, with this deep water port, which could handle it's really got tremendous advantages in that it's a 30-meter natural deep water port. You don't need to dredge to accommodate these China Max cargo ships, which can accommodate 800% more cargo than if you're taking ships out of the eastern coast, the Atlantic coast of South America. So, this port essentially will function to tremendously enhance China's ability not only to bring its goods into Latin America, but also take agriculture produce from Argentina, which China desperately needs, and food. And also Argentina and even Chile are very, very rich in lithium.
Exactly.
Chile's, I think, the world leader in lithium export right now. And so therefore, between the lithium and other rare earth minerals that you get in Latin America and South America, that's certainly something that China covets controlling.
Yeah. On that point, Jerry, if I could just jump in real quick. So,
sure.
Yeah, no matter what happened, I'm not a green energy guy. Neither are you.
No.
Obviously, I always promote your book.
Thank you.
I always say, because while I don't promote it, we still have a growing 21st century economy that requires batteries.
Right.
We can't not live with batteries. So even with the current pace of just expansion of technology, computers and other things, we're going to continue to have a steady supply of lithium and other rare earths. That's something we should corner. And this is what I don't understand. And this is where I hope the Trump folks are paying attention. We have to recognize that not only through tariffs must we reduce the ability of China to basically hold us captive to rare earths and technology, we have to develop our own. So to your point, Jerry, this needs to be one of the places we partner with to have access, unencumbered, uninterrupted access to rare earths for purposes of reestablishing our own production of technology within the United States.
Yes, I see it also like a similar national security issue. I mean,
Absolutely.
The globalists, the left, wants our borders open so that we can have an influx of illegal immigrants. And of course, now the Democratic Party is supporting even the Venezuelan MS-13 elements in the United States. They're their new poster children. But the same thing of not getting these ports. It's allowing China to command all the export and resources from South America. It's kind of like a loss of sovereignty again. That in other words,
absolutely.
These are resources that impact our ability to remain America first.
Yeah.
And just like the tariffs are going to make it harder for us to ship all of our jobs to China. I mean, this whole free trade was all about one way transfer of capital out of the United States, transfer of manufacturing jobs out of the United States, and a destruction of the middle class. And again, if we're going to have America first, we've got to secure our borders, but we also have to make sure that we contain and think about these ports and other natural resources of infrastructure that we need to maintain in U.S. control. I mean, if we're down at the Panama Canal, why aren't we also concerned about this port in Chile? And so just on that national sovereignty issue, just on the issue of, the Trump doctrine expanding the Monroe Doctrine, thinking about our hemisphere security in a world where,
one of the first things I'd do if I were Pete and I'm not. He's much better looking than me, just saying. But if I were Pete Hegseth, one of the things I would do is I would get together a group of people like you and me, some smart generals like General Raisin Kane, a few other folks who understand the nature of our talks. Go to the War College or Navy War College. I mean, go to one of the colleges. I like Carlisle. I'm an Army guy. I love Carlisle Barracks, the Army War College, and discuss how to come up with a Trump doctrine. This should be
Yes.
something that's formalized and implemented across the board. It'd take about 6 months to do. You could do this. And I think that the very thing you're saying, Jerry, should be essentially the 5 bullet points, expanding our sphere of influence, expanding our sphere of nations who are essentially part of the republic. Go about doing that and make it a policy. And by the way, you got 3 years in to work it, and I think it'd be very helpful. But that should be a roadmap going forward. So again, they should have an offsite. Yeah, you could do this in 3 days, easy. Get it all kind of laid out, go through, establish the framework, agree upon it, and then implement it. And I think this would help everybody understand how important this really is for the American.
Well,
The American
I think it's a great idea. I mean, and look, you have to look at these things globally in the sense that things are
Absolutely.
reconfiguring right now. We're getting a reconfiguration. China with the Belt and Road Initiative, and now they have this maritime initiative, which is also, they're saying, well, it's good to have the Belt and Road where you can put roads, but where there's ocean, you better have a maritime belt and roads.
Exactly.
And
they're out producing a ship wise. They have something like an order of magnitude more ship capacity building than we do at this point.
And they control about 169 ports around the world,
Right.
largely in the southern hemisphere. I mean, across Africa and across the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aqaba, India, all the way over to China. China is just seeing this, the southern hemisphere, which is rich in resources and economically was always the third world, as fertile for them to develop this maritime empire,
right,
and access these resources, the rare earth minerals and other resources that these countries have.
Right.
And we're not strategically the other consideration that I've had is that both Russia and China are militarizing the Arctic.
Yes.
And doing it very fast, as well as outer space. And Antarctica is not far away from that. So, I mean, when you start looking at, the Western Hemisphere as our sphere of influence, it's going to need that kind of a vision in order to compete with Russia, which is looking at the BRICS nations, and China, which is looking at the Belt and Road Initiative. So, these are, what concerns me is that, I know Todd Callender very well, and he's a strong patriot, and he desperately is trying to get the attention of Rubio and the State Department to pay attention to this port. But with everything else going on, it's how do we get the attention of the State Department to focus on this in a timely fashion? Because China's got a memorandum of understanding in place. China is going to press to close this, especially since they know we're making an issue of it.
Yeah.
So we've got to get this to the right people.
Well, I think we need to, this is a evergreen. The fact that we're having this discussion, this becomes something that we can socialize, which we will. And secondly, I think we should, there's some people I think that probably could pick this up and say something to President Trump about it as well. What I've found so far is that, again, 3 months in, you don't have a comprehensive bench to go to. There's a few folks, I'll just be blunt, that know what they're doing. Tulsi Gabbard, Pete, a few others, secretaries, but they haven't been able to really establish a bench they can go to get things done. They can't turn to someone and say, hey, go do this. So this is where President Trump is very important right now, try to get it to his level. So he says, this is a priority, go do something about it. I think the bench will develop. It's going to take him a while because I'll be, again, blunt, there's resistance. There is an organized resistance in all directorates, every department of the government trying to fight the Trump agenda. So it's tough because you got to fight the swamp, and you got to not only get the swamp, protect yourself, you got to start looking over the horizon to things like this. And that's where the challenge is, to get the right people to pay attention.
Especially when it's time sensitive, especially when China is going to grab this before anybody in the United States, before the Trump administration is really firmly set in place.
Right.
I mean, within each department, you've still got, I mean, Trump has maybe fired 10% of the federal
Not
workforce.
enough, not near enough, not especially the leadership level. Jerry, they've got to go down at least another 2 levels and get rid of folks before they're going to be able to be
and these people will come and tell you that they're loyal to Trump, that they're here doing important work. And when you start looking at what they have been doing, you can see what they've been doing is, selling the country out to China.
Right.
You look at the Biden administration, how much money Biden took from China, and Mitch McConnell enriching himself with China. And so China found it easy to come and buy U.S. politicians and has been doing it systematically. Well, in the meantime, they're very actively building relationships and natural resources and infrastructure that once it's gone, how are we going to get that port back once it's gone to China?
Yeah.
When China starts restricting
military action. Yeah, no, I get your point. I get your point completely. So it's something that's going to be very difficult. Yeah.
But it's got to be done. In other words, I'm writing articles about this to make it clear that we have to start paying more attention to South America. And Milei is a very good ally in South America. But again, we've neglected so much of South America. We've got Argentina, which is now turning in the right direction, but you've still got Venezuela, you've still got Brazil, you've got other countries, Colombia, producing drugs, you still have Mexico, and Trump's going to have a lot to do to turn these countries in an economic direction. Right. Now, the combination of what Trump is thinking about with, doing future payments for natural resources, maybe get a company like Morgan Stanley in here, begin developing options, or futures 20, 30 years out on Chile and lithium, you can generate wealth simply by creating the futures trading on those resources.
Right.
And Trump begins to combine this kind of creative finance work with the fact that we want to help these countries develop. I'm finding in the Middle East and in Africa, we even had the Congo saying, we'll come in here and settle our civil war. Just give us some options on our natural resources. These countries are desperate to have development and to have economic progress being made. Look at El Salvador. It's turning El Salvador around from the home of MS-13 to now being whether they're willing to take MS-13 captives and, murderers, mother rapers, father rapers, baby rapers, all the worst scum of the earth, and willing to imprison them. And, it's our lawfare that's in the way of blocking this.
Yeah.
And so therefore the resistance is still there. And for Trump to have his own team in place, I mean, I'm concerned about, Pam Bondi, whether she's going to be effective enough. I remember her compromising in the Zimmerman case and appointing special counsel. She seems to not have the resolve to tell the radical left that they're insane as they are. We got Van Holland out having margaritas with MS-13 terrorists and in El Salvador and worrying about whether they had judicial review before they were deported is insanity. These are not citizens. And again, the left will not go easily into the night. It's going to have to be beaten. And what Doge is doing with taking its money away is vital. Take the money away.
Yeah. So, I think that's why you see a diminished tempo of protests. And you see older people, no offense to us being older, showing up because the youth ain't showing up because they ain't getting paid. And you've got people like Jamie Raskin and other Democrats who should probably be keeping their mouth shut, because I think if I were the president, I'd try to remove their pardon, because I don't think it's worth the paper it was auto-pinned on, just saying. And I think that I'd look at them because, him and Chris Van Hollen, these people are engaged in national security and foreign affairs issue, which they do not have the authority to be engaged in. And I think if I were Pam Bondi, I'd be looking seriously at, I don't know, maybe the Logan Act violation is something to start with, So,
well, I think this interference, this entire lawfare interference is going to raise issues. If you've got district judges or issuing national injunctions that have an effect across national policy, there's a simple solution. There's two simple solutions to the judiciary. Number one is Donald Trump can introduce into the Congress a plan to reorganize the district and circuit courts. And that plan, if passed, will make all existing federal judges who have lifetime appointments, if their courts are gone, they don't have lifetime appointments.
Right.
So you can reappoint the entire federal judiciary with the new Federal Judiciary Reorganization Act. And secondly, even that would be an excellent way to, and therefore establish that the district courts are, primary jurisdiction and are not to exceed their reach. And to have the circuit courts, we have circuit courts in every state instead of having circuit courts that are over a group of states, so that each state has a circuit court to appeal to, and then it goes to the Supreme Court. I mean, you could have a restructuring that limits jurisdiction and redefines the function of these courts, and thereby get rid of all these Soros-appointed judges in one fell swoop.
Well, there's no legality for these courts to have this sweeping authority, Jerry. They just kind of absorbed it and decided they took it. And to me, that means that, that there's ample reason to say nobody ever gave you the authority to universally inflict your belief on the executive, because that's what happens here. You have individual judges who have a limited scope being able to essentially override an entire branch of the government single-handedly. I don't know how that's proper.
And what you've got here increasingly is that, go back to the constitutional structure of the courts. When the Constitution there was a debate in the Federalist Papers between Jefferson and Hamilton. Hamilton, of course, always wanted stronger government. Jefferson was constantly afraid of government power. And so Jefferson was deeply afraid of what he called judicial tyranny, where the judges would take it upon themselves to say, here's the law and everybody has to obey it. And so the key issue at debate was whether or not the judiciary would have enforcement powers. And Jefferson won that debate. The courts do not have enforcement power. I mean, what is Justice Roberts, who, by the way, is constantly mouthing off at his country club, and people are talking about this from that country club, about how much he hates Trump, which I think is a very bad idea for Justice Roberts to be blabbing his mouth and openly expressing bias like that.
Well, he's a Bush guy, so I'm not surprised. So
well, I mean, he marginally a Bush guy. He was a globalist to begin with. And I was involved in that because, if you remember, I was the one who largely exposed Harriet Miers, who Bush first nominated for her role in that Texas lottery scandal, George Bush's role in the Air National Guard.
Nuts. Yeah.
And it got rid of Harriet Miers, and then we get John Roberts, who was supposed to be a conservative, but John Roberts constantly voted for, Obamacare. Well, the final analysis, I mean, Trump can say, that's a nice opinion, Justice Roberts, but I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And what's Justice Roberts going to do? Is he going to scream to the Washington Post?
Didn't Andy Jackson say no to the courts?
Well, there's been a number of justices, a number of presidents who said no to the courts and just did not do what they told them to do. Just ignored it. So, that's fine opinion, but what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And, and again, there's nothing basically that they can do to the president, because what we're talking about here, and Chris, I'd like you to go to the slide before that. Chris is showing some of the slides. I want to comment on one.
Yeah.
But go to that. Just keep it there for a minute, Chris. I'll describe it. But the point I'm making is that the Article 2 powers of the president are the strongest enforcement power the Constitution gives. The legislature has no enforcement power except for the purse. They can defund things if they don't like them, or fund things if they like them. But even if the Congress funds it, the president is not required to spend it. We can have rescission, clawbacks of funding from Congress. But the point is, and if you take a look at this map that Chris is showing, which is, Tony, it's the Pacific Ocean. And
I saw that,
the trade routes now, which are going across into China and Asia. So, these are extensive, and they're reaching into Southeast Asia. China's reaching into India. It's reaching into the Gulf of Aqaba and the Red Sea. China's going to control that whole South Asia part of the globe.
Yeah.
and China's also buying ports in Australia. So China's control of the Pacific Japan is fading in terms of significance over China. And it's only a matter of time until China decides to take Taiwan or try to take Taiwan. They took Hong Kong.
Some form. Yeah.
In some form. Now, under the powers of commander-in-chief, Donald Trump has extraordinary powers here. And the lawfare to limit his powers, I think, is powerless when it comes to commander-in-chief authority. That's why I'm also looking very hard at the executive order Trump issued on the voting and the fact that the Department of Homeland Security has now taken the lead. Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, making voting fraud a security issue, given the penetration of China into the computers of the state boards of election. China's admitted to penetrating our infrastructure and so we know the state boards of election have algorithms written into them. And so Trump is saying, how do we know it's not China cyber attacks?
Yeah.
And Tulsi Gabbard saying, we know our election machines are being penetrated, including the ones inside the state boards of election. That implies who's doing it.
Yeah.
Well, these are national security issues under Article 2, powers of the commander-in-chief. And what the court thinks about that is irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, let me pick up on that a little bit, Jerry. So part of my issue is that the prior administration and the Democrats in general are completely open to influence because they're essentially for sale. You mentioned yourself, Joe Biden, he was bought. Many of the leaders, Adam Schiff, Swalwell, these people are all literally, well, some are in bed, some are in the tank.
Literally in bed.
Literally in bed. Literally. And I'm being a bit funny about it, but I'm not. I mean, it's true. And so what we have to recognize is they have been successful in penetrating not only our voting system, they've, to your point, bought the best politicians available. So this is why it's important. The Chinese are not blessed with the natural resources and gas and oil we have. We could essentially decide, we're going to shut ourselves off. We're going to just stay Western Hemisphere only. Canada, Central America, Latin America, we'll be fine. China can't do that. China does not have the gas and oil necessary for its billions of people. It doesn't have food and water for its billions of people. They are desperate. So that desperation has helped inform their nationalism. They are far more nationalistic than they are communistic at this point. They are imperial. It's an imperial nation. It should be the people's imperial nation of China, not the People's Republic of China. Just saying, if you actually study what they're doing and who they are. And it's a oligarch. They got oligarchs. I think we can say that, right?
Sure. It's a typical communist country of the modern version.
Exactly.
All the people are equally poor.
Yeah.
Okay. It is based upon slave labor. It is dependent. The reason China's a maritime power is they have no choice. And so therefore,
exactly,
if China doesn't get a structure where they get all the capital to build the factories, and then we buy the goods from them while allowing them to impose tariffs on our goods, this is what free trade has come down to be. Free trade is just another nice name for the reality behind it, which is we're letting China take over the world and we're complicit in it as long as China pays the politicians like Biden to do it. Or runs the sex and drug parties and films everybody, Epstein, and we still don't have all the Epstein data. We don't have all the P. Diddy data. Still waiting. Okay, and what's all this with pedophilia? I mean, the pedophilia seems to come up all over the place. And this is the combination of evils that Trump has got to combat. It's not just bringing people back to God. It's dealing with the satanic origins of MS-13, the satanic nature of their rituals, the satanic nature of this child sex trade, the drugs. Right. I mean, you can't convince me that the CIA, you couldn't run the drug trade without the CIA's involvement, because they need a bank,
Oh, I
need the money
Well, I
launder.
think Tulsi's going to expose all that too. I really do. I think Tulsi's on a good path. But by the way, speaking of pedophilia, did you know that when the Pope dies, they use a silver hammer to hit him in the head 3 times, see if he's alive? I'm not joking about that. Well, at least
No,
they
I
used
know
to.
they do. Well, they do things like that, but this Pope was LGBT to the core, and
Yep.
the Church, Catholic Church, has unfortunately become either a homosexual or pedophilia supporting organization, and it's tragic what's happened since Vatican II. I've been very close to Archbishop Vigano, and I'm raised Catholic, and now that the Pope has died, of course, or decided it was time to kill him finally and get the next one in there, which they're rushing to do the conclave so the LGBT cardinals can control how things are done before the others from around the world arrive. And if the church remains LGBT, and by the way, Vance was meeting with the Pope the day before he died or the day he died, and with the amount of corruption between Biden, McCarrick, the Vatican, and Honduras, which I've been writing about and will continue to expose, we don't need to look at the Catholic Church anymore as what it used to be. This is again, an LGBT corrupted organization. You see McCarrick there with Pope there, Obama and Pope Francis. I mean, Pope Francis was totally on the climate change hoax. Every leftist
We
hoax
talked
you
about
could
that
have,
today on the other show. Yeah, exactly.
and he was not at the true liturgy of the Catholic Church when you are introducing this new modern mass. You're introducing all the reaching out, the synodal movement, reaching out to the marginalized groups, which means making a place in the Catholic Church for transgenders, transvestites, and every other sexual freak you can want to imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, rather than saying that these are sins against God's nature and so the amount that has to be cleaned up here is tremendous. Now, Donald Trump has done a great job of messaging, but the job that has to be done now is to dig down into these institutions and root the evil out. And that's where Doge is so important, because if we take their money away, they all die. Without the money, they're not going to survive. And, again, I'm on this theme of making sure we appreciate how important this port is, because it's going to happen quickly. Someone's going to have to intervene, or China's going to get on that we're talking about it, and China's going to start upping the pressure to complete the transaction, to go from an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, to an actual final agreement. Okay, now I want to cover one more point before we wrap up, and that is that in 1972, when Nixon and Kissinger went to China, their professed hope was that we would get China into the world economy, and therefore China would become a more nation,
nicer neighbor,
a nicer neighbor. That they weren't going to become like Russia was, the Soviet Union at that time, which we viewed as a professed enemy.
Right.
Now, as opposed to what Nixon did, you see Reagan came in, and the other point of all the mixes you made, this, having Star Wars, spending, the Russia and Afghanistan, and expanding resources. Also very important was that Reagan took control of oil, and oil was reduced to about $19 a barrel, and that was Russia's revenue. Reagan essentially bankrupted Russia.
Exactly.
And China could be easily bankrupt. China does not have the resources we do in terms of economic activity. You pull the plug on slave labor and say, we're going to bring making semiconductors back to the United States and Nike shoes and everything else we're making over there with tariffs. And there's no reason why we can't make the Apple cell phones here in the United States.
or in Vietnam or India. I mean, we have other alternative trading partners who would be better partners, to be honest with you. And with that, within the context of that, yeah, we have the Straits of Malacca, which is a choke point where the Chinese depend on Middle East oil coming to them on a frequent and regular basis. You've got the South China Sea, the East China Sea. These are all fished heavily because the Chinese need protein for people. These are all points of weakness, Jerry, that I don't think the Chinese fully appreciate, and we haven't reminded them of. And I've said I would be very harsh. It's probably why I'll never be working again in the Pentagon, but I would be very harsh when dealing with the Chinese on this. I would remind them on a daily basis, you cannot survive more than a couple of weeks without Middle Eastern oil. You cannot survive if the Philippines, the Vietnamese, the Taiwanese, South Koreans, Japanese all get together and decide they're not going to permit you to fish in the part of the ocean they consider theirs. Just saying.
Well,
So
and
these are all vulnerabilities which we don't remind them of and try to use to leverage.
And their economy falls apart without us exporting all our manufacturing to them and other countries exporting all the manufacturing to them.
Right.
Okay, so I think the key element here is how do we get this information to President Trump and to others so that they can begin to see and act upon it, because this is just too important. China also has a port in Peru, north of this port in Chile. And so China's positioning with control over the Panama Canal, a major port in Peru, and wanting this port in Chile, China's going to control shipping out of South America all the way from the Panama Canal down to nearly Argentina. And we just can't let that happen right now.
Right. Well, I think Pete Hegseth has already made the policy directive. I don't know what you want to call it. He's basically working with Panama. That was the first, I think, required reacquisition, if you will. And I think that's well on the right. I think, again, there needs to be a strategy, and hopefully this will stimulate discussion at the Pentagon, at the State Department, for us to actually embrace understanding how to partner with Latin American countries like this and take control of this, because now's the time to get that done. So yeah, you've got Panama, great. Now it's time to go further south and get it all the way down. So I think by talking about this, by having this getting to the right people, Jerry, I think we can help make sure that this becomes policy within the Trump administration.
Yeah, if Hegseth is aware of this, and it would not take much to become aware of it, and certainly Marco Rubio will get it. That the idea of our control of the hemisphere to Marco Rubio, whose roots are in Cuba, and understands what happens when foreign nations take over a country in the Western Hemisphere. He experienced it firsthand. His family escaped Cuba. Okay, and so therefore, communism is not a stranger to Marco Rubio, and he should also be aware of the need to. But the State Department, our State Department, has spent the last, since Clinton, doing everything they can to open our borders, to invite in criminals and others into our country, to make sure non-citizens vote, to abandon our sovereignty with, and not respect the fact that the United States, as a nation state, the whole idea of nation state was repugnant to these people.
Right.
Who were communist globalists.
Well, and beyond that, the State Department became the implementer of organizations that encourage foreign nations to collect intelligence on us, like the British, and turn it around against us, as well as organizations within the State Department which actually practiced propaganda and countering truth. They became essentially the Ministry of Truth, like described in George Orwell's 1984. So that's being stopped as we speak, and let's hope it never resurrects itself. The State Department became essentially a tool against the American people.
Well, I want to thank you, Tony. I wanted to get your perspective on this, because your background and understanding of national security and foreign affairs is essential to understanding exactly what's going on here. And if we can communicate this to the Trump team, I'm sure appropriate
I'll work
action
with
to
you
be
on it.
taken.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks, Jerry. Good
Okay,
seeing you.
thank you. And in the end, God always wins. God will win here too. And well, thank everybody. This is Corsi Nation. We're doing podcasts every weekday. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow. God bless.